Bismarck? Never heard of her. The Hood? Yamato? Terpiss my pants? Scharnhorst? The USS Arizona? All good contenders for sure, but let me tell you the story of the Swedish flagship, the Crown. The year is 1672, and looking out into the harbor of Stockholm, you notice an irregular solar eclipse. It's not the moon, it just happens to be the new state-of-the-art, hulking, 3-deck, 110 gun-carrying, wood-for-days having behemoth built for the purpose to dominate the Baltic Sea. Our story leads us to one of the many wars between Sweden and Denmark. After the Swedish independence from the Kalmar Union during the 1500s, the Swedish Empire grew dramatically in size through a series of decisive victories against its neighbors. The Swedish primary goal was to make the Baltic Sea more or less a Swedish lake, making great headway during their many wars. With control over vast swaths of islands and coast, it was only their old nemesis Denmark in the way. But to defeat the Danes this time around, in the Baltic Sea, they needed a totally original idea, never attempted before. A massive warship with several cannon decks to outgun any Danish, Norwegian or Dutch competitor. Seeing as their last original design for such a wonder ship ended up in the biggest naval failure that millennium with the Vasa, they would surely be successful with their new ship. The plan was simple: defeat the Danish once and for all, and prove to the world that a new seafaring superpower had emerged.
Phase 3, profit! Oh, I get it.
Not being faced by their old track history, the Swedes went to work. One of two build styles were proposed: the Dutch way or the English way. The cheaper, more cost-effective Dutch way, mostly intended for way smaller boats sailing along shallow coastlines, would mean getting the ship out in record time for a low cost. The English way prevailed, due to a superior and more advanced shipbuilding method, and presumably to avoid another traumatic experience like the Vasa, which used the more Dutch design. With a more wider and rounder bottom and bow, the great weight of all the guns on board, the displacement, resulted in an estimated 2,300 tons, for its time making it one of the heaviest ships ever set afloat. The Swedes prepared for war by amassing a grand fleet, under the leadership of Aragon from Wish.com, named Lawrence Kreutz, on board the flagship the Crown. A perfect opportunity for Kreutz to show his never-before-seen naval leadership skills, one could imagine, and totally not a liability for about 10% of the entirety of the Swedish Navy as a result. The time had come. The Swedes were moving their fleet down towards Scania and northern Germany. The war between Denmark and Sweden continued to escalate to a point where the Dutch saw no other choice but to act. Much like an intervention against a crackhead, the Dutch used brute force to contain the Swedes in a bid to keep the balance of power in the Baltic Sea.
Hey, what the fuck are you doing? What the fuck are you doing?
God damn.
The Danish fleet, under the command of Niels Juel, accompanied by the Dutch fleet and Admiral Cornelis Tromp in the Baltic, met the Swedes just outside the island of Öland to decide control over the Baltic Sea. For the Danes, it would mean the availability to land an invasion force on the Swedish mainland if they controlled the sea, and for the Swedes, they would be able to ferry more troops desperately needed in the German territories. Ships lined up, shots rang through, and the smoke from the cannons formed a fiery mist over the ocean. The Swedes had the initial advantage, with almost 20 more ships than the Danish and the Dutch fleets combined. Leading the fight was our main character, the Crown, and Lawrence at the helm. Is what would have happened if it weren't for the crucial point that the Crown literally exploded at the absolute beginning of the battle, after being hit at the bow, subsequently making the whole ship lean and capsize due to its tall structure. Killing everybody, over 800 soldiers and sailors on board, dumping large quantities of silver, gold, weapons and cannons into the cold sea forever. Now, I wouldn't be a good historian naturally, if I didn't repeat and echo the feelings of everyone else that lived after him, that Kreutz were to be held totally accountable and solely responsible for the entire thing. Imagine that. Building a ship that's effectively uncontrollable and having it sink the second you try to do something. And then, like, after 30 years, why not a second time? Or a third time, perhaps. Well, the point I'm trying to make is the Visby class needs to be about 3 or 4 times larger. Thanks.